Okay, maybe we can start. Thank you all for coming to the discussion today about militarization of law. Our guest today is Dr. Flutura Kusari, who is an international human rights activist and a lawyer specialized in freedom of expression and media freedom. Currently, she works as a senior legal advisor for the European Center for Press and Media Freedom, where she runs the legal support program for journalists. She co-drafted the Council of Europe recommendation on SLAPPs and also contributed to the drafting of the EU directive on SLAPPs. So she focuses particularly on this issue. So today we will be talking about using law as a weapon, as a tool in the hands of those who have power, but we will particularly focus on SLAPPs as one of the main ways of such abuse, as that is Flutura's area of expertise. So I would perhaps start with a more general question. We tend to think specific, even particularly when we go, for example, to law school as lawyers, of law as primarily a tool that helps us enforce our rights. But many times, law can also be abused. It can become a weapon in the hands of those who have power, either public authorities, private actors, and so it becomes a tool of power and oppression. I'm wondering what, in your view, is abuse of law, and what was the thing that kind of led you to your area of expertise, so SLAPPs as one of the main tools, legal tools to abuse law?
Test, it's working. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Barbara and Grounded Festival, thank you very much for having me. It's not very common for media lawyers to speak at the festivals like this, but I very much welcomed the invitation because of the topic. So it was mentioned, and we see that the topic is militarization. And what we're seeing across Europe is how law is being used and abused by those in power, those with powers, against journalists and activists. I will perhaps start this discussion with a story that I will try to keep it very short. It started in 2017 when Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated. She's a Maltese journalist. Currently, there is a trial going on where we see people very high in positions were allegedly involved in discussing, or they knew about what happened. So some activists in different international organizations, including myself, we traveled to Malta. We wanted to show solidarity with the family. We wanted to join the campaign for justice. And while we were there, personally, I was interested about Daphne. I didn't know who she was. I didn't read her work. I had no clue what Daphne, who she was. A part of understanding that she was one of the most powerful journalists in Malta. She worked alone. She did not work for any media outlet. She also had 47 lawsuits at the time of her assassination. And her husband, but also other family members, mentioned this. And they said, you know, before she was assassinated, she was unable to do her job because she had to spend so much time in the court. It was even mentioned that she went twice a week, and you can only imagine what that means. Because going to court is not just physical exercise. It's not that you go there, you sit, and everything happens by magic. But the preparation you have to put to defend yourself takes a lot of time, let alone money and other resources.
And also some cases were even brought against her in the UK, right? So not only in Malta.
So what I know is that majority of cases was in Malta. One was in United States, but UK law firms were very much against after Daphne. So she received a lot of legal threats before they were filed as lawsuits by London-based law firms. Some of them have a very bad reputation for using this type of ways to censor them. So of course now the question is how, as you said, what they are, and for me, if we explain this in a figurative way, and being in the festival with this theme, I think it's like it's like directing a pistol towards a journalist or an activist. And sometimes when that is multiple legal actions, when they are coordinated, when they come from very powerful people and entities, and it feels also as a heavy weapon that comes against you. So the question is, what does it take to be defended? I think it's very important, especially for non-lawyers, to understand that strategic lawsuits against public participation are false lawsuits, are fake, they are invented. There are no issues with reportings or public participation or whoever is the target. The purpose is not to win in court, and this is why they're called abusive. For example, if an NGO is fighting against hydropowers, against abuse of natural resources, and then that NGO or a person gets sued, it's not because he or she or the organization is doing something wrong. It's to delay their activism, is to create obstacles in that case, is to shut them down and to send a message to others. Look what happens to you if you, let's say, talk about hydropowers. The same is for journalists. When they publish an investigation, then and a lawsuit is filed, and we're assuming about an investigation which is properly done based on ethical standards, the truth has been reported, then with the lawsuit, the purpose is first to put a question mark on the investigation, to confuse the public whether this journalist or that journalist report it as they should. Then is to take the time of that particular journalist or media outlet so that they don't focus on what they're supposed to do, which is journalism. Their focus is no longer anymore on what they're supposed to do because they have to defend themselves. Another impact is that they buy time. If you are a prime minister, or if you are a minister, or if you are a business person, and you sue the journalist, you put journalists in a position not to be able to report about you until the case is finished. Because it can be seen as subjective. It can be seen as, oh, maybe he or she is doing this on revenge. So the politician buys time with slaps. And you know in politics what it means to buy time. It's very important and I'm talking from politician perspective. So yes, in the end, these cases are lost in court. But is that really a victory? This is the concern, and this is why we had the European campaign to fight slaps, because that victory is really not a victory. If you spend years, if you spend money, if you lost, we have cases when people lost their houses because of legal fees, they lost families, they got divorced because of the impact it had, then you know that victory is not a full victory. So these are the reasons why there was a European movement to fight slaps, and now we are in a better place, but there is still a lot of work to do.
And you've said that in this case, defendants win. And that is usually what happens, right? But there also is, because with slaps, it's a lot of times it happens that it's not a completely ungrounded claim. And in some cases, it can even happen that the plaintiff wins. So how to view these cases? For example, the Greenpeace case, was it in the USA? They won, and now the Greenpeace, they are suing in the Netherlands. So how to kind of go past that challenge to see something as an abusive action, even though, for example, the claim is either partially legitimate or even wins the case?
So on Greenpeace, the American system is very complex for me. I don't have that expertise, so I'll not comment. My understanding is that the case is now on procedural aspects. And my understanding is that Greenpeace is challenging the application of the directive in Netherlands. So we have to wait what the court will decide. Now, if you report about something and plaintiffs sue you and they win, that means it was not a slap. But there are situations, because slaps are abusive lawsuits with no grounds. Now, there are situations when, let's say a media outlet reports about a very complex matter, and it might be that they get it wrong. not the entire article, of course, not the entire report, but they get wrong some facts. Maybe they don't have the complete picture. And in these situations, we were also discussing today with lawyers and journalists, it's very important that the right of reply and the right of correction is applied properly. So the European Court of Human Rights has said in several cases that if you are a journalist, you make a genuine mistake, and then you react properly, meaning you correct quickly, you apologize if the mistake is very big, and journalists don't like to say, I'm sorry. This I know for sure. I've worked for way too long with journalists, but there are situations where you need to say, we apologize. And then even if you are sued, and that mistake was corrected, there is clear standard by the European Court of Human Rights that you should not be held liable. But if you report something wrong, you don't correct it, you don't apologize, you don't follow all the steps that you're supposed to do, and then you lose the case, I'm sorry, but that's not a slap. That is because you have abused your power. And I want really to stop on this. I don't know whether we have journalists present here or no, but if they see this online. I cannot stress enough how important is the right of reply and the right of correction. Because as you know, journalism and media is the fourth pillar. That means they have a lot of power. They have the power with one click to destroy the reputation of, let's say, a politician. And with good reasons. They are there to do that, exactly. If you do something wrong, then they are supposed to report that and tarnish your reputation. But if journalists get it wrong, or they don't have the complete picture of the situation, and more information is provided, they need to take that very seriously. Correcting does not mean that you did a bad job, but it completes the picture that you are trying to present to the public. So if you did everything by the rules, eventually you made a mistake and you corrected, that case should be easily won in court based on the European Court of Human Rights standards. But if you lose the case because you said a paragraph which was untrue and you damaged the reputation of somebody, these instruments, the EU directive and the Council of Europe recommendation does not protect those people.
You partially already answered my next question, basically, because a lot of people wonder with the SLAPP legislation how it will affect access to justice. You know, how it will affect, how basically to strike this balance between protecting potential SLAPP targets and also still enable people access to justice.
So when we discussed the directive and the recommendation, I was, as mentioned, part of the expert committee of EU and expert committee of Council of Europe who drafted the recommendation. We discussed a lot, of course, the impact of these instruments on other rights. And one of the main arguments that was mentioned that we need to be careful was the access to justice. We argued back then, and we still mention that the recommendation and the EU directive does not have any negative impact on right to access justice. Why? Because it does not forbid anyone from going to court. What it does is that if you address the court to abuse the court and the law, then the case should be dismissed immediately. And this is what changed since Daphne was assassinated. So I started by saying that it's because of Daphne that we started to discuss with a small group of people what can be done about this, and is this a European phenomena? And we figured out that the law was being abused across Europe, in some countries more, in some countries less. We got together, we created Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe. It started with 5 of us, now it's a movement of 120 members. We convinced the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, and the European Commission to come up with standards. And now we have these standards. We have a directive, we have a Council of Europe recommendation, and a European Commission recommendation. So for non-lawyers, what changed is that in 2017, or before these instruments were in place, it took years to deal with a case. In some countries, more years, in some countries, less years, but it really took years to dismiss a case, to say, oh no, this is abusive, there is nothing on it, we dismiss it. Now judges have the power to dismiss them very quickly. And the impact, I'm hoping it will be that those who file slaps will no longer find this attractive. And I am pretty confident about this, because if you dismiss a case quickly, that means you protect journalists from making their life miserable with these court cases and activists. If you publish a judgment where you say it's a slap, this is what member states are supposed to say. If you make a database publicly where it's written that this company filed a slap, if there is a fine, like it will be, for example, in Poland or in Ukraine if the legislation passes, I see no reason why they would use slaps. This is not to say that they will not become creative. As you know, those who want to go against journalists and activists, they are 10 steps ahead of us, finding ways to go after public participation. But if the directive and the recommendation is transposed properly, and Slovenia is a good example, then hopefully this phenomena will be used less and less and less.
And in line with what you've said, you probably do believe that there are enough safeguards so that the slap framework itself will not become abused, or?
Yeah, so these are, I call them standards, but I'm referring to the directive and the recommendation, and therefore the national law. These standards don't protect those who defame. It does not protect irresponsible persons who abuse the right to freedom of expression. There is no chance you can lie about someone. Let's say you say a factual sentence about a politician, a businessman, a professor, it doesn't matter. And then you say, and you get sued, and you say, oh, but it's a slap. Because the mechanisms that are within both instruments means that you have first and foremost to be responsible. You cannot say, I said this about this person, but I didn't know it was not true. That does not protect you. It also links very much with public interest matters. If you talk trash about private matters of people, these standards don't help you. If you, again, mention matters of public interest, but you don't do the verification of information properly, or you don't inform the public that you try to verify information, again, it does not protect you. For example, you've seen in TV, I always mention this as an example, often you would see journalists, I think they are called, so you have journalists when they report, let's say, about Ministry of Education, and then they go in front of the Ministry of Education and they say, we tried to contact the officials, but they did not respond. So this is what they're saying to you, they're talking to the public, and they are showing to you that they have abided by ethical and legal rules. They are telling you, we tried to verify the information, they did not speak, and that is enough, as long as you attempt to verify the information. So whether there will be attempts to abuse them, I think so, but I don't think this will be the case. And I want to mention recently, so the ECPMF where I work is based in Leipzig. We're funded by the European Commission. Recently we had a request for legal support. We give money to pay lawyers' fees for journalists who cannot afford it. And there was this case, all the information that we need was there, but there was this piece of information when the journalist said, because one of the questions is, have you contacted the subject before you report about them? And the journalist said, it's painful to admit that I did not contact the subject. And for me, that's it. I just close the case and we don't give support. You cannot run a story without contacting the subject. So the person can claim it's a slap, etc., but it's not.
So we talked a lot now about the responsibility of journalists, but I would like to maybe also talk about the responsibility of lawyers, because lawyers are often seen as only providing help for their clients, in a way being a pistol, of the client when going to court. So what responsibility do lawyers have when, for example, they are approached by a client and they assess that it would potentially be a slap case?
Personally, I hold lawyers responsible as much as I would hold the person filing a lawsuit. So if the lawsuit comes from a politician, a minister, I hold equally responsible because lawyers in this case are enablers. The lawsuit would not make it if it was not enabled by the lawyer. And lawyers, absolutely, this is a discussion at the European level. They say, oh, but it's what they say in UK, cab rule. If they come to us, we say, yes, no, you have ethical standards that you have to abide. You cannot file a lawsuit because you get good money and abuse the system. So I hold them accountable. Secondly, we've worked with some regulators, and there is a good initiative in UK where at least in 2 cases there were investigations from the, I think it's called Solicitors Authority. So the result, in one case it was closed, one case I don't know the result. But just the procedure that was started and the news that this started had an amazing positive impact on lawyers, because finally they were being held accountable for filing abusive lawsuits. And I think this is what should happen with all regulatory bodies. It is different in different countries. At the same time, of course, we have many lawyers. I think we would not be here in terms of standards without those lawyers who contributed. But definitely there are enablers who are enabling SLAPs, and that's why we, as CASE, we have this contest, the anti-SLAP contest, where we give awards to those who go after journalists and activists, and we have awards such as Bully Lawyer of the Year, SLAP Country of the Year, SLAP Politician. We change a little bit the categories depending on developments.
Can you tell us who the last bully of the year was in terms of lawyers?
I would need 1 minute to check because I don't know by heart, I tell you. But the website of CASE is public, so all the information is here, including a link of the YouTube, because we make it like a show. It's based on the Eurovision Song Contest. And it's usually around that time, so we give these awards. And I tell you, in some countries in UK, it has discouraged law firms to go ahead.
And they also have, I think, in the UK, the regulatory institution for lawyers. They put out a warrant, warning notice regarding to lawyers and to law firms that they cannot or should not take on SLAP cases, and that they will take into account this warning and lack of adherence to it when they will be conducting their regulatory powers. So that, I think, is really important. And I think also in Ireland, they have something similar, or certain provisions particularly related to abusive proceedings. But there's quite a lack, I think, still, particularly, I think, due to the necessity to change this perception that if a client comes to you, it's not like you don't have any responsibility when talking about taking the case or not. However, there's also this financial, the question of financial independence of lawyers. So is there also like an area where something could be done potentially, because a lawyer who is very reliant on client after client after client has a more difficult time of, for example, saying no when confronted with such a case. I know it's not an excuse, and I'm not saying
I think if you have many clients, I think you are in a privileged position to be selective. And I think it does not, the fact that they like money very much, it's fine to want to earn more money, but I don't think it justifies them. Nothing really can justify a lawyer who knows that a case is 100% lost, that a journalist did exactly what he or she is supposed to do, yet you file a lawsuit knowing the consequences, and lawyers know the consequences, and they can't say, oh, but the client asked. I think that's not okay. I don't know the rules at different countries, really, but what I've done personally, so I'm originally from Kosovo, I work remotely from Pristina. We had a case related to hydropowers when Kelkos company, they are an Austrian company, sued 2 activists in Kosovo, one for 100,000 euros and one for 10,000 euros because they put some Facebook posts where they were showing the damage hydropowers did to the environment. And we, as civil society activists, we went very much after lawyers. Yes, against the company, but also against the lawyer. We mentioned them by name. When we did the press conference, we mentioned them by name in our filing, so everywhere, and the cases were withdrawn eventually. So really, I hold them equally accountable.
Yeah, but I think this change of perception, particularly in like lawyers and their ethical standards, is something that can be a particular protective mechanism that perhaps isn't addressed enough. I mean, it can't be also in the legislation, but still. You mentioned also before when we had the discussion in the morning that you do, if I remember correctly, you do workshops with judges as also and lawyers, and I was wondering, based on your trainings, what are the main concerns or the main obstacles that for judges when applying anti-SLAPP legislation? What are the main issues that you see?
So the Council of Europe has developed a training curricula. It's a 300 pages comprehensive curricula specifically on SLAPPs. And it provides a training material for up to 3-4 days for legal professionals and other actors like civil society, media. And we've done trainings in many countries. I can mention Poland, Estonia, most of the countries in Southeast Europe. And I would share several highlights. First and foremost, very often when we go to trainings, in my case as a trainer, there is a tendency to say, oh, but we don't have SLAPPs in our country. And then after 3 days of trainings, oh, I think we have cases of SLAPPs. Because they see the indicators, how you identify a case, and then they go back in their head to cases they have or they have had, and they're like, oh, but based on these indicators, maybe several cases would apply, would fit in the category. In the beginning, the concern of judges was that how do we recognize a case from a typical defamation lawsuit? And that's why both instruments, they have a list of indicators, which judges and all others are supposed to look at these indicators. And if the answer is yes, in several of them or all of them, then the likeliness that it's a SLAPP is very high. It's a sort of a test that needs to be applied. And really, I think if judges apply that in details, and it will not be easy in the beginning, they can have a good analysis of a case. But there are two elements that they need to establish in the beginning. So I don't know the system here, the judgments here, but I can talk about Southeast Europe. Judges don't pay a lot of attention on the public interest aspect of a case. So the first question in cases of defamation, any case of defamation, should be, is the matter concerned a matter of public interest? Because let's say if you have an activist speaking about hydropowers, then the level of protection for that activist increases. But if the activist has said something privately for a person that he or she dislikes, then the protection is almost gone. So this is the first question. And second question that judges should discuss is the capacity of the person who is suing. Again, if the Prime Minister is suing, then the level of tolerance from criticism of the Prime Minister should be extremely high. They enjoy very little protection. They do have protection, but very little. This is not the same, for example, for a civil servant. Civil servants, nevertheless, they have to abide by some decisions, so they have they should be scrutinized a little bit less than those who receive powers. Or, for example, if you criticize judges, then you need to be very careful with them. They enjoy very high protection. Why? Because they cannot speak, they cannot counter-react to. It's one of the few professions when they cannot hold a press conference to say, no, it's not like that. So if they answer these two questions, A, whether the matter is in public interest, B, who is the person that is suing, you already know where the case is going in which direction.
And
Yes, sorry.
And are you perhaps aware of any case law? I know not many countries have transposed the directive already, but are you perhaps aware of any case law that already exists where the anti-SLAPP legislation was used?
Yeah, I think one of the recent cases, but don't ask me about the facts because I don't know the details. We have an email list where we exchange information, and I know that recently in Belgium, judges refer specifically to anti-SLAPP directive. But before that also there was a judge in Bulgaria who referred to the EU directive and specifically said, look, it's not enforced yet. In Bulgaria, it was not transposed, but it has all the hallmarks of a SLAPP. So I think we have judges across Europe who are more courageous and who refer to SLAPP directive and recommendation, but most of them, they wait for the transposition. It's safer if you refer to the national law and not directly to the international instruments.
But what is the best thing, for example, for a judge to do in a state that, in the EU state that has not transpassed the directive yet, or that will keep on prolonging the transposition?
Really, I think we need to know the national law, but I would argue that if you have a SLAPP case, the standards have not been transposed, but you have the Council of Europe recommendation and the EU directive, I think you can have direct application of that. I don't know of any country which forbids this, I think, but as I said, I don't know the national law in all countries. With regard to judges, I want to mention that really for any member states of the Council of Europe, I strongly urge them to use the capacities of Council of Europe and expertise, because they do provide capacity building for judges, prosecutors, lawyers, journalists. They work on demand basis, so a country needs to request them. But we've seen like concrete changes in different countries after the capacity building. I don't dare to use the word training because I was told some they don't like the training, but capacity building events.
Okay, I have a couple of more questions prepared, but we discussed, because Flutura expressed that she would like a conversation with you. So please, if you have any questions or any topics that you would like to discuss, please ask. Otherwise, I have backup questions. Okay. There in the back. You put your hand up just in time. I was just about to go to backup question.
Yeah, I thank you for this presentation. And I was thinking about the Italian situation, because we are implementing...
I cannot hear you very well. Louder.
Can you hear me? Okay. Now, I was just thinking about the Italian situation, because we are just implementing transposing the EU directive, but with the bare minimum, no? So, like, the only cases covered will be SLAPP suits that have some international dimension. And this will leave out, like, 90% of the cases of SLAPP in Italy, at least.
Did you hear? In Italy.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a civil society coalition now pushing for a broader reception of the law, but this is easy. I don't know if this is relevant for other countries too, but I think this is an easy way out of like circumventing effective transposition of this.
So I was in Italy for a fact-finding mission. With the organization I work, we do fact-finding missions on media freedom issues. So we go, we meet with all stakeholders, and we produce reports. So I was in Italy, in Rome, in May, and the situation is really disturbing. This was also our finding, with all the difficulties in various aspects. Not to go into that. We had a meeting with the Ministry of Justice, and we understood basically that they're limiting only to cross-border, and I can say it's such a pity. So far, I know that only Malta did implement only the EU recommendation, and not the Council of Europe, sorry, the EU directive. So just to explain, the EU directive focuses on cross-border SLAPs. That means if you are sued in another country. The Council of Europe recommendation covers all types of SLAPs. And in ideal world, a member state should implement both instruments. Malta wanted desperately, because of Daphne's case, to go first. And they got it extremely wrong because they focused only on cross-border. And as a result, the family said that if our mother was alive, the directive would not have protected her. She would still be going in court. Italy is another country. The draft law is online. And the justification I heard, which of course I don't accept, is that, and also the system there is very strange to me. So the parliament gives the order to the government to pass legislation, and the legislation does not go to the parliament. So in the beginning I thought I was misunderstanding anyway. So they said, oh, but the parliament limited us to EU directive. But my understanding is the same part, you know? Parliament and government is the same party. So if there was political will, what I want to say is that we would have both instruments there. I was hoping the Council of Europe would help, but I don't know whether they requested any legal opinion. So from our side, we can't help much, but when there are cases to continue to support journalists, and we have a long list of Italian journalists that we support, but I'm hoping also civil society there is more vocal. I think sometimes I feel that the attitude of civil society there is, they're too nice. I think the criticism they gave is absolutely valid, but in some countries we've seen more aggressive civil society people be more vocal, not aggressive, more vocal. I think people should be more vocal.
Do you maybe have any examples? You said some civil society that they were more vocal and perhaps...
Poland. Like in Poland, there were discussions from the first, they were very vocal to convince the government. They managed. Then the government put out a draft. Then they were criticizing various aspects of that, like with conferences, press conferences, reports, meetings with ministers. And now we have a very good national law in Poland, and I think also because of contribution, but not of civil society, but not to blame people in Italy, because in the end, you know, it's Meloni and her party who decide. So if they don't want to provide more support, and we see their attitude against journalists, which is very bad, then it's difficult for anyone to convince them. Sorry, I don't have a better, more positive response.
Any other questions?
Hana, Naiputia? Yeah? Sorry, my daughter is here.
Okay, then maybe...
She had questions.
Then maybe I would just briefly ask a bit about your work more concretely, because you support journalists and media workers across Europe. What kind of legal pressure do you most often encounter? And could you give us an example that illustrates what this looks like in practice and what it also means to the person who is targeted?
So I give a more broader answer. We run Mapping Media Freedom. No, let me put it this way. There are two platforms in Europe which document threats against journalists. One is called Council of Europe Platform on Safety of Journalists, and the other one is Mapping Media Freedom, which is run by ECPMF, EFJ, IPI, a group of organizations. The Council of Europe focuses on serious violations. There are around 300 per year that we document. And when they are documented there is a request which is sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the respective member state for a comment, and we follow on those cases what happens to them. And then eventually we call them alerts. They are documented, and if the case is resolved, then we close them. Mapping Media Freedom documents around 1,500 cases per year only in European Union and candidate countries. The number is bigger because mapping media freedom documents anything that creates obstacles to journalism. So even minor incidents. And unfortunately, in the last 10 years, what we see from both platforms is that the situation is becoming worse and worse. You can see the annual reports of both platforms. I'm often asked, oh, which report should we refer? For me, the best or the most comprehensive reports about Europe are these two platforms because is evidence-based. So the situation is becoming worse, and there is a continuous deterioration of media freedom across Europe, with killings being the most serious threat, physical attacks, the danger to equipments, property of journalists or media houses, meaning phones, cameras, and then it's abusive lawsuits. We have also seen this with the legal support program that we offer. So our program is a program that gives money to lawyers to cover for their fees when journalists are sued. In principle, we only support journalists who are sued, but there are situations when we make exceptions. For example, if especially female journalists are harassed online and they want to file complaints, we help those. If there are journalists, especially public broadcasters, who are sued as form of censorship, we've had a couple of cases in Slovakia and Poland, we help them. So these are some of the cases, and the way it works practically is there is a template, they fill in the template with all the data. My first or my focus is on why they were sued. And because also my studies are on defamation, I can easily figure out whether it's a merit-based lawsuit or is it just to make pressure. So we ask journalists what specifically you wrote and which part is being questioned by the lawsuit. So once we do our own analysis, and then we have a legal affairs committee, it's an external body that helps us, and then we decide whether we give, sometimes it's 1,000 euros, sometimes it's 5,000, sometimes 20,000 euros. It depends from the media outlet. The biggest support we gave to Gazeta Joborska in Poland, because they had hundreds of lawsuits before Tusk government. We like also we prefer to monitor cases in the court, but this is limited because it depends from me and my colleague, and also budget is not very big. But when we have a chance and there is a high profile case, then we go in that country and we monitor the cases. This is more to raise awareness about certain important case.
And are there any important cases that you monitored that were difficult for you or that you were particularly passionate about because the situation was so dire?
I can mention we've monitored quite a lot of cases, but I can mention an active one. I just have to be very careful with the words. Enormous, sometimes I'm like too free. So there is a case of an Albanian journalist in Albania. He was sued for defamation by a former chief prosecutor of Tirana, a very powerful person, before she did not pass the vetting, which was a test on integrity and not only run by European bodies in Tirana. He posted this person is a journalist. He's now the president of Association of Journalists, very good reputation as a journalist. He was amongst very few people to write on Facebook to say that this chief prosecutor is exercising pressure on journalists. And he also reported this on our platform, Mapping Media Freedom. So the case is now, I believe, in the 4th year. And it's about to be concluded, but it took around almost 3 years to start the case. Because all the tactics that are described in the EU directive and the Council of Europe recommendation were successfully used so that the case is delayed. One person was ill at one time, a family member got ill, and then another family member got ill, and somebody died in the meantime, and the judge was ill, and she changed the position. All sorts of reasons were used for this case to be delayed. So we have, I think, the verdict in September. We'll have to see, but we're talking about a journalist with a very small salary. I don't have the authorization to mention the salary, very small salary, who had to travel from Tirana to Elbasan by car. That is quite expensive for when you have a salary like that. The journalist took off his annual holiday days because the employer, I don't know whether they allowed or not, but I know that he used his days, his holidays to go to the court. And then the budget was also impacted because I think he lives with his mother is ill. So the impact on this journalist was extremely high. And that's why we supported the case. And I'm hoping that there will be a good decision and in his favor. I do consider this 100% as a slap lawsuit, a typical one. But if the judge thinks differently, then we're ready to support the case in next stages.
And do you have have you had any difficulty in any case, for example, to assess whether you will take it on or not?
So I think for me, the first question before I assess the case is to understand the reputation of the journalist and media outlet. Sometimes if there is a media outlet that everybody knows in a country, or for example, if it's public broadcaster here, or if it's Denik N, or if it's N1, then that is already established. But if you have a small media outlet that very few people know, then I try my best to do a lot of research by asking people that I know, associations, etc. And then secondly, it depends from the information they provide. And what I've learned is that when they provide very little information, often is on purpose. So we insist especially to understand, as I said, why were you sued? For me, it's relatively easy to know from the sentence. Like if you used very harsh words without any proof, then that means good luck, you're on your own. So the difficulty is very often to get the information, and we've had cases when we said no. Sometimes I'm 100% transparent and I give the reasons. Sometimes we consider that it's not even worth it to give the reasons why we reject, so we would give like a minor response, but we give still response. There is a country in Europe where lawyers were informed about the legal support we provided, and they learned by heart how to fill in our template, and the template we got were the best. Like all you needed to say in the end was, yes, we give the money. And then we did a fact-finding mission, and also in addition to that, an investigation. So we tried to understand in this certain country who is who. And we understood that there was a group of lawyers working together who knew all the funds where they should apply, and they were applying for those funds, whereas it was possible to give pro bono support for these journalists. And you know, with international community, it's on one hand, I think it's very helpful to know them and to have an open door. But at the same time, if you try to manipulate them or to misuse them, the thing is that we share information. We are only few international organizations in Europe who has very limited budget for journalists in need. So we work so closely with each other. There is no chance a media outlet or a journalist would go, or a lawyer would go to this organization and that, and then in the end gets money from all of them. This doesn't happen in Europe because we work so closely. So there have been situations when these limited resources were attempted to be abused, but we have strong safeguards because really when you have little money, and now we know that a lot of money goes on security worldwide, we want to make sure that that goes to a journalist who simply cannot afford to pay for lawyers' fees.
Okay. Maybe I would just ask, As a final question before I ask if anyone has any more questions, what does someone who thinks they're a victim of a slap or a target of a slap, what is the first thing they should do? Particularly, for example, in case they're not a journalist, they're an activist, they're an academic. What is the thing that they should do?
Yeah. So my attitude normally is, and I think sometimes I shock people, is that as soon as we receive information about a fresh case, be that directly from journalists or if I see online, and this is maybe also my Balkan approach in terms of just being very direct, I would call the person. I would call the person because I think solidarity for journalists is very, very important. And in some countries, and in some media outlets, and I don't generalize, but I have seen cases when journalists did top investigations, the editors and owners praised them and put them in front of, front page and everything. And when they were sued, they were like, you are on your own. But I think it's the opposite should happen, because if you do something big, then the story speaks about you. And so solidarity for me is very important. And I've had so many people whom I call and I just say, look, you are not alone, and they burst into tears, because it's one of the most. Courts intimidate you. Even if you go to submit a document or to request a document in the court without having a lawsuit, is the nature of the institution that creates a feeling of intimidation. So when you receive a letter saying that you are sued, let alone if the amount is high, then you think, oh, but I'm losing everything. Will I be fired? This is very often the case. It impacts them financially, it impacts them mentally. So for me, showing solidarity is very, very important. And I want really to mention, I don't know, and I don't have any prejudice about Slovenia, but when journalists are threatened, even in cases when there is competition and sometimes journalists don't like each other, it's totally normal in the sector, I think it's very important to show public support. Because this is important in the eyes of the public. Okay, so the public often is like, who is rallying with him? Is he or her? Secondly, I think it's very important to speak up. Some lawyers will disagree with me, I tell you now. Including some journalists, they will say, oh no, but let's wait, let's see what happens. No, the best protection you have is the public. You're working for them and you have to inform them what is happening to you. Of course, you choose the language. You don't double down on criticism because that can get you another suit. But to be factual, to say, I have been sued, I stand by my reporting, and I will fight this in court, I think this is necessary. The other thing that I would say is to collaborate with the Association of Journalists. You are lucky in Slovenia to have a good association of journalists. Whether there are people who dislike them, I'm sure. This is everywhere. But in Malta, the association, it's not called association, but the organization working on media freedom, they didn't even express condolences when Daphne was assassinated. It's this level. And in a lot of countries, take Serbia, for example, you have a lot of associations. One serving to Vučić, and the other serving to other interests, but you have also one very independent. So if you have an association, even if it's not the strongest one, but you consider it independent, report the cases to them. In the case of Slovenia, as soon as it is informed the association, they inform EFJ, it comes to our platform, it goes to the Council of Europe, a lot of time is spent. They do the work for journalists and for us. And finally, as I said, we have the legal support program. It's limited. I hope people will not need here. But if they are sued and if there are journalists who cannot afford, they have an open door at our organization.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe we have, okay, yeah, there in the back.
Hello, Flutura, Brankica here, Peace Institute. I would like to ask you a bigger picture. First, and this is the reason why, who is funding this great effort you are doing, financially supporting, that you can support journalists all around Europe, because it's so precious and important, but it's also important to not only to know who is funding it, but how sustainable the mechanism is. You know, what I would like to ask you about European Union now, is it, how to say, safe source of funding of media freedom projects and initiatives? Particularly in context that we recently presented in the European Parliament findings of our Horizon research report on media and democracy, and MEPs there hosting us said that the current composition of the European Parliament would never vote yes again for Media Freedom Act and probably also for SLAPP, anti-SLAPP and so on. So how do you see the composition of the European Commission Parliament now and in future, whether we can rely that you and we will have such support in future? That is my question.
Just because we're a bit short on time, I would just ask before you answer if there are any more questions, just so we get 2 or 3 more. No? Are there any more questions?
Yes.
Okay, here.
Yes, I have time, but only if you want to close it, so we can stay longer if there isn't. Okay.
Okay, so then I'd like to thank Brankica for allowing us to talk about future, not only the actual present. There is this sin called epistemic trespassing. I'm not from your field, I'm not a legal mind, I'm a silly artist, but I dare encroach. We are seeing in my field that you can never shame a fascist. What you are discussing, with all the admiration I have for the massive work you are doing, to me sounds like let's shame the hell out of them, and then they will feel bad about what they are doing. I mean, people in power stomping on journalists, and that will help. So we are counting on people in power to limit themselves on their moral compass. Like Donald Trump said, we don't need international relations, I have a moral compass. So are we really relying on that long term, or do you dare speculate about, you use the word optimism, no, you use the other one, pessimism. It's hard, right? I don't know if this is a question. You will figure it out.
I will, and I start from you before I respond to Brankica. I am a human rights activist. I represent a civil society organization. What we do is extremely limited. I think it's practical support for people in need at a certain moment. We cannot do more than that. I understand what you say, and I ask this question also as a human being, you know, how are we helping, whether we are contributing in making the situation worse? But I think this is a question for politicians, what you're asking. I would disagree, and you didn't say this, but I think if you try to hold responsible civil society for not influencing more the situation in the right position, I think it's just too much to ask. I am practical as a person. This is outside of my work. And I want to say that I believe that all of us who have a role to play in this life should do our best. And this is what we can do. We cannot change governments. It's not our job. It's not my job. I wouldn't advocate for voting for this or for that. I believe in the role of journalists genuinely. I believe in the fact that if people know what is happening, eventually, they will make the right decisions. Maybe not in the first 4 years, maybe after 4 years. And we've seen in a lot of countries people changing mind. So for me, one of the important contributions in a democracy is to make sure that the flow of information is free and those who inform us can do their job. And that's why I believe in, I have the opportunity to go privately as a lawyer, but I do believe in the role of civil society. Whether things will improve, I don't know. I told you in the last 10 years, with all the work that I mentioned, and Brankica is here, I don't have to tell you how much Brankica has contributed in this field. Everybody in Europe knows. But it's this much that we can do. It might be that it continues in the wrong direction, but personally, I don't give up. I think that's not a solution. On one hand, you have powerful people fighting journalists and civil society with all weapons, legislation, funding, denigration. It's like putting them in front of the wall and just throwing all your arsenal towards civil society and media. This is what is happening. We should not give up, and we fight as much as we can. I don't know if I answered your question, but we can continue with maybe discussion. Brankica, look, I am not an expert on funding, really. So I mentioned in the beginning, ECPMF is funded mainly by the EU. So Media Freedom Rapid Response is a project, it's a consortium funded by EU every 2 years. That means we only know for 2 years that the organization is supported, and of course it's not sustainable, because you operate only every 2 years. The legal support program started with 10,000 euros per year, and now it's 100,000 euros for all member states and candidate countries. So those who know lawyers' fees, sometimes 450 euros is per 1 day of a lawyer, sometimes. You can see, you know, what contribution is this. That's why we're extremely careful with money. With the legislation, I agree, I think an MP said, what we got during the last commission was exemplary. ENFA, DSA, Digital Service Act, European Media Freedom Act, Anti-SLAPP Directive, heaven. Normally it takes a lot of time, but we had a good commission. Whether this commission would deliver, I really don't know. If I had an idea, I would express it. I don't know. I think now we're working with them in transposition and implementation, and good work is being done. But for fundings, I think the European Union continues to work more on kind of short basis, and for civil society, that is very challenging. What kind of a plan is if you plan just 2 years for knowing all the things that are happening to journalists, but we work with what we have.
Monica?
Yeah.
100,000 euros from European Commission for legal aid to journalists in all EU member countries and candidate countries. Monica, what did you say yesterday about military budget? Yeah.
How much it is?
Billions, you can say. Yeah? It is even more to you to be respected, because it looks, if you follow this field, it looks that you personally and case, coalition, and support is all around, that you have millions. But
I think very often this is the impression.
It's you to be shamed for such a small budget, yeah.
I would like to add just one thing, because I think it's a really great opportunity. You say that support of the people who are attacked, or who are not victims, who are the center of the SLAPP cases. We have in Slovenia, I think I have to mention these 2 cases, which by my journalist opinion are SLAPP cases. We have my colleague Primož Cirman. Primož has, just to know that people know, and he needs support in maybe different ways, so each of us should be aware of these facts. But Primož has got, last November, it was 53 lawsuits from one person, Rok Snežić. 51 was like criminal and 2 was for damages. So he's one Slovenian journalist who is very under attack of these lawsuits and this person who is suing him. So the other one is ecological activist Andrea Slameršek. She's a fighter against hydropower plant in River Sava. She's great in her job. He won 3 cases on a court to stop this project with arguments, with analysis and so on. but she is now sued by state-owned energy companies. And I don't know, I talk just spontaneously here, but I don't know if these two people need support, but just to be in our minds that these are concrete people here in Slovenia also that are under attack of these people with the money and people with power and political backup. So just to be aware, this was the only thing I want to. Thank you.
Thanks on Necenzurirano, we've supported them. They had 39 cases, I think, by the same person, Rok Snežić. But I was not aware about the new cases. And as for the activist, I don't know her, but I can guess the amount of pressure that is on her. Because I mentioned the Kosovo case, these are powerful entities that fund community, and then community is turned against you because they see a risk from remaining without that fund. So the way it works is that sometimes they don't even have to be so aggressive. It's the community that turns against you. In our case, we focus on journalists, but maybe we can have bilateral talk about her.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Perhaps we have time for one short one still. It's the answer that are wrong.
Unfortunately.
Do you have any comment on that, Flutura? I think it's a good final statement.
I fully agree with you.
Okay, then I would like to thank all of you that you've come and also discussed with us this issue, and of course to you, Flutura, for your optimism, for your courage, and for everything that you do, and for keep on having faith to do what is in your power.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.